Hello, my name is Matthew Steinke, and welcome to my channel. If you don't know, I review movies because that's what I do best. And today we are going to be starting off my Halloween series of reviews, and our first review is going to be the 1968 classic Night of the Living Dead. Night of the Living Dead was directed by George A. Romero and stars Duane Jones, Carl Hardman, Judith O'Dea, and Marilyn Eastman. The plot revolves around a couple of people stuck in a farmhouse out in the middle of a field, facing off against the undead that are trying to come kill them. Alright, let's get into the positives. George A. Romero. George A. Romero is the biggest positive I can have on this whole film. He co-wrote and directed the film, and he is the father of the modern zombie. Now what this means is that he is the one who put zombies into pop culture, and that is cemented by this film. Every single thing that has ever been in zombie media from 1968 onward was inspired by Night of the Living Dead, and that is all due to George A. Romero. Without George, The Walking Dead wouldn't exist, Shaun of the Dead wouldn't exist, heck, even Dawn of the Dead wouldn't exist, and that's a sequel to this movie. It was all thanks to George A. Romero and his wonderful direction that made this film stick into pop culture. There are some scenes that he directed so well that they still are a little bit creepy, even today. They were shocking in 1968, but now today, in 2019, these scenes still have a little bit of palpable tension in them, and that, I think, is not only due to the acting and the plot, but without directing, those two things don't even exist, because you've got to get a director to make those things be put onto the big screen, and George A. Romero does a fabulous job directing this film. The next positive is the acting. Duane Jones shines as the hero, Ben, in this movie. He is just a hero that we relate with. We want to see him escape. We cheer for him when he defeats a member of the undead. I mean, he's just a hero that our eyes flock to. He is the main source of heroism in this film, and he sells it perfectly. He's a character we relate with. He's a character we like. He's a character we want to see get out safely. All the rest of the actors are good, and they were mainly theater actors before they got into this film, and so the transition from theater into film is practically flawless. I mean, these actors do a really fine job selling their characters on the big screen. And theater from film isn't that big of a jump, but it is technical-wise, on the behind-the-scenes facts of things. So they do a really fabulous job in this film. I'd say the second best actor in this film is Carl Hardman, who plays Harry. And Harry's kind of like the jerk, the one who bosses everyone around in the dire situation. And he plays that character really well. He nails that kind of love-to-hate archetype. And he nails it really well in every scene that he's in. The plot is also fantastic. As I've already said, this film inspired every piece of zombie media to come after. And the plot is something that has obviously stuck with every other piece of zombie media. And every single plot that we can see that has come in a zombie piece of film after 1968 has been inspired by this plot. You know, an isolated group of characters in a secluded area fighting off hordes upon hordes of the undead. That's in like every single zombie thing I can think of. And it's done pretty much perfectly here. I think Dawn of the Dead does it just a little bit better, but this is done really well, especially for a first film. It's just done spectacularly. I mean, there are films with bigger budgets, more of a crew, you know, bigger actors, and they don't do it as well as this film does the plot. Also, as another positive, I want to go ahead and go back to the acting, and I want to go ahead and say that the zombies in this film, the actors who played the zombies, the extras, do a spectacular job. People just don't really focus on the zombies unless it has cool gore, and this film doesn't have a lot of gore in it. So just watch the zombies. They're really good at selling that motionless, dead kind of expression that makes you believe, well, these are corpses come back to life. The actors who play the zombies in this film are really, really good, and some of them are very, very memorable, and I think that's only due to the character and the life that they give these zombies. Because these zombies are basically nothing. They don't have names, they don't have backstories, so the only way you can sell it is by giving them character, and some of these actors just give these zombies character, and you remember them. Alright, let's get into the negatives. I don't have a lot of negatives on this film, I only have one. I could be nitpicky and say, oh, the sound design's bad, or Oh, that shot was bad, the film's grainy, but hey, this was a low-budget film made in 1968 by a guy and a couple of his friends and a couple of actors. I mean, I'm not going to trash this film. The only one serious flaw I can have with this film is the character of Barbara, played by Judith O'Dea. She starts off as the main character at the beginning of the film, and she's the one that propels the whole zombie apocalypse. Well, she doesn't propel it, but her interaction with one of the zombies propels the story forward. And she starts off, like I said, as our main character, but then we switch to Ben as the main character, and then he's the main character. And so that's not a bad thing, but Barbara should have something to do, and instead Barbara kind of just stares off into space and lays down, or sits up, or walks around with the same expression on her face, and then sits down some more and mumbles to herself some more. She doesn't really do much for the rest of the film, and I feel like that's kind of a waste of character. Now, I've heard arguments before that she's traumatized by what happened at the beginning of the film, and that's a valid argument, but I feel like she still should have had something to do, because we don't go to the theaters to watch traumatized people and them being motionless and expressionless. We go to the theaters to see characters push through the trauma and get something out of it. But I can understand that maybe they just didn't have enough time to fit her character in. I can't really think of many reasons on why it is, but there's been so many discussions and so many analysis of the topic that I don't really have much to add other than just mentioning it here in my negatives. Alright, I'm going to read my conclusion word for word because I think it sums up my thoughts on this film pretty well. Horror films up to the 60s were a joke. Known as the monster films of the 30s and 40s, and then the endless B-movie creature features of the 1950s, horror never got the respect it deserved back then. It was relegated to Saturday matinee showings at drive-ins, double features that people take their dates to, basically a tired cliche. But in the 60s something happened. Psycho came out in 1960, Alfred Hitchcock's masterful film that launched the slasher genre, and over in Britain, Michael Powell's 1960 film Peeping Tom came out. And those two films switched something on in the minds of critics. They started saying, well, these horror movies have good stories, they have good characters, they have stuff that we think about after we leave the cinema. And so that's when horror was starting to catch on. That's when it was starting to get taken more seriously. And as the decade went on, Carnival of Souls, Repulsion, Blood and Black Lace, and The Haunting, these movies gave even more life to a genre. But it all came to a head in 1968 when this film was released. It was terrifying to the audience of the US, which until then had never seen such a shocking ending. People were getting blown up, eaten by zombies, people were getting stabbed by gardening tools. I mean, it was simply unlike anything that had ever been seen before at the time. It was a game changer for the horror genre. Now, 51 years later, this film is nowhere near as shocking as it was back then. Sure, it's violent, but it's nothing compared to even what's on television these days. I mean, now it's barely got anything bad in it at all. The only gory thing in this film is one scene, and they use chocolate syrup as blood because this film's black and white. So it's not effective at all. Nowadays we get more gore every year. It's like every horror film that comes out, it's let's amp up the gore. And the selling points they have on the films, it's not, this is a good film, this has good characters, this is a good plot. It's, look at how much gore we crammed into this one scene. We've strayed away from characters and plots, and we've just gone into startling techniques and gore. And this is a film that I think anyone who wants to make a horror movie should watch so that we can finally get back onto the right track of what horror movies should be. It's a movie that won't traumatize you. It has great characters, a good story, and a message. It also has a fun atmosphere, and I think it's nice to just sit back and watch a horror movie that has all of those great things, plus it's just fun. It's a fun horror film that's a little creepy, sometimes scary, and a good film to watch with friends. That's why I love it, and that's why it's lasted all these years. It knows what it is, and it doesn't care that it's not going to be the most revered film of all time. It's a monster movie, a Halloween flick. The dead come back from the graves and start chasing after people. It's not Citizen Kane. I mean, that's why I love it. Unlike Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, this is a film that you should tell someone to watch if they have never liked horror and they want to get into the horror genre. This film isn't traumatizing at all. Sure, it's a little eerie, it's a little creepy, but that's what horror movies are supposed to be. This film isn't devoid of any intellectual content at all. It's not just that you've rented a seat for 2 hours and you're staring at the screen going, oh, look at all that blood coming from the ceiling, or oh. It actually makes you think. And that's what horror movies should be, and that's why this movie needs to be watched even more today than it should have been back then. I mean, it's got everything. Not only does it have all of those things that make you think and can better you as a filmmaker, but it's also just a fun movie to watch. It's got all of these things in a tightly wound package, and I just think that's why it's so fantastic. I mean, almost the entire zombie genre was started by this film, spawning sequels, rip-offs, and television shows based off of this one idea that George A. Romero made. It's all thanks to him. And if you're looking for a film that you can watch on Halloween and not get disturbed by or not lose brain cells by because you're not thinking at all and you're just mindlessly watching people get butchered, I think this is the film. It's a fun flick that's a thought-provoking, freaky selection for your Halloween film list. Alright, I will rate Night of the Living Dead a 4.9 out of 5. Guys, this film is fantastic. It's scary, it's spooky, and it's fun. It's all around just a fun film that you can watch with your friends. And I think that's what Halloween's all about. Just having fun with people that you care about. Alright, guys, thank you so much for watching. It means so much to me. I appreciate you all. Leave a comment down below of a horror film you'd like me to review, or just a film in general. I'd be happy to review it. There are more Halloween reviews coming soon. Throughout the entire month of October, we're going to be taking a look at some of my favorite horror films and some horror films I think you guys would like very much. Subscribe if you would like to. I'd really appreciate it. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and go watch movies.